You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to, watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today's 8/23/21. Well, we have lots to talk about here. If you're looking for this video on YouTube, you will not find it. We're in the YouTube jail for the next week or so. But if you're watching on BitChute, well, then you don't really care about that, do you? Well, John Rubino is with us, and now we're going to talk without self-censorship this week. And John, hey, it's great to have you back. Make sure you go over to dollarcollapse.com and take a look at John's site, read his prolific work, and send us an email to kl@kerrylutz.com. Let us know how you feel about our uncensored Gone Wild show here. Well, not quite. But anyway, John, hey, we've been watching gold claw its way back out over $1,800. It's kind of an important story that you can't really talk about in isolation, can you?
Hey, Kerry. Yeah, well, it was interesting what happened with gold and silver over the last month or so, because they kind of had a flash crash. Probably because of all the taper talk coming from the Fed. In other words, the central bank was going to start to tighten, which would mean higher interest rates and maybe lower inflation, which is bad for precious metals, blah, blah, blah. And precious metals did what you would normally expect in those circumstances. They fell pretty hard, but nothing else did, because normally stocks will fall as part of a taper tantrum too. So for a little while there, we had these asset classes going in opposite directions, and one of them had to be wrong. In other words, one of them had to be consistent with what was going to happen in the future, and the other one didn't. And it turns out it was gold and silver that were wrong, because everything else has just continued to go up. Now, gold and silver have snapped back, and the Fed is kind of taking back the taper tantrum or taper talk already, in part because of the new COVID variant that's coming along and maybe leading to another lockdown and maybe slowing the economy down and everything. So that gives the Fed the excuse to continue with QE and artificially low interest rates for a while longer, even in the face of higher inflation. So gold and silver, seeing that, had snapped back. Or alternative explanation, this last week, I put a bunch of low ball bids in for gold mining stocks, thinking there might be a bigger flash crash. And the way the universe works is that anytime I do some kind of big thing like that, it goes the opposite way right away, So you're welcome. I pushed back gold and silver back up to their old levels.
Way to go.
Yeah.
Good work, John.
Happy to help. Yeah.
We need more people like you out there pushing gold in the right direction, don't you think?
By doing the wrong thing. Yeah. Yeah, that's me.
Whatever it takes. I don't care.
Yeah. But anyhow, as far as the miners go, they're still making lots of money at $1,800 an ounce gold. So this is still a really good time operationally for the precious metals mining sector, which means good news will continue to come from those guys. Whenever they report anything, it's going to be a positive surprise, probably going forward, which will help their stocks, all other things being equal.
All right. Well, we like that, don't we?
We do.
Hey, so look, Afghanistan, this is kind of an insane situation that we find ourselves in this situation. Don't you agree here? I mean, this is like the worst thing we've ever seen.
Well, it's potentially a really bad thing for reasons that go way beyond Afghanistan. We look incompetent and weak. Not because we got out of Afghanistan, which was the absolute right thing to do, but we did it badly. I don't completely understand what the rationale for doing it the way we did was, because normally you would think you get the people and the expensive military hardware out first, and then you pull the soldiers out, right? And we did it in reverse order. We just yanked our soldiers out of there and left American citizens and what, $1 billion worth of military gear there?
Multi-billions.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that implies gross incompetence on the part of the guys who have planned this thing out. Now, but that's not the big deal. The big deal is that it sends a message to the other predators out there in the world that they have kind of a free hand for now, maybe, because, China has been wanting to take back Taiwan forever. They consider it a breakaway province. But they couldn't just go in and do it because the U.S. would react violently to that. And China didn't want any part of our military because we were perceived to be by far the most powerful military in the world. Same thing with Russia and Ukraine. They want to keep Ukraine from joining NATO, which is an anti-Russia military organization, because Russia's only blue water naval base is in Ukraine. They lease it from Ukraine, and they would lose it if Ukraine became part of NATO. So they want to do something about that, but they didn't want to, pick a fight with the U.S. But now we're looking weak and distracted, which means they have an opportunity to get something they want without as much of a risk as us taking it very seriously, as we would have in the past. So it wouldn't be a surprise to see both of those guys move at the same time. China takes back Taiwan, Russia takes Ukraine, and dares us to do anything about it. And can you imagine, what the conference table would be like in Washington if that happened, where you'd have Biden, Kamala Harris, and 3 or 4 generals, woke generals wearing their little rainbow pins, trying to figure out what to do about 2 major potential nuclear wars out there. I think we would probably just cave and possibly go too far the other way, where we would be afraid of being weak. So we would escalate and roll the dice, either way, chaos in the world. And we've kind of opened the door to that possibility by being so incompetent in Afghanistan. So that's the bigger picture, and it's a very scary one. From any angle you want to look at it from, militarily, it's terrifying, and geopolitically, it leads to just more chaos. And the financial markets are not going to like something like that at all. Forget about taper tantrums or something like that. We'll see something much worse. And Kerry, you and I are old enough to remember the 1970s. Is this starting to remind you of those times? It is me, where we look weak. The rest of the world spins out of control. Nobody wants to hold dollars anymore. Interest rates and inflation both spike. We could be heading that way. We're starting to basically trend in that direction on a lot of different levels. So people of a certain age should think back to what it was like then and consider what it could be like going forward.
I totally agree with you, John. And this is a time where we really could use some leadership, and it appears to be completely absent. The former occupant of the Oval Office, say whatever you like about him, and it's probably all true. But, he did show leadership in certain times and when we needed it, and we're not getting it now.
Well, the thing about Trump was not that he was competent, but that he was unpredictable. If you're Russia or China, you have no idea what Trump is going to do if you make him mad. And that's an inhibition, that keeps you from doing extreme things yourself, because you just don't know what's going to happen if you do that. And, with the current leadership in the U.S., it seems like they're distracted by a lot of other things. The whole the woke thing in the military just terrifies me, where you've got these guys saying, racism is the biggest threat to America, and the second biggest threat is white anger, white rage, domestic terrorists are our biggest military threat. You know what? They may well be a threat, but they're not our biggest military threat. You've got a lot of other things to worry about out there that are vastly more serious than some guys in MAGA hats raising hell in Portland or something like, that's not on the list of really serious military issues. And so we shouldn't have generals talking like that. And because when they do, I think that just, it's like hanging an all-you-can-eat buffet out there on the world to the other predators, who sense weakness and are tempted to act on it.
In nature, nature abhors a vacuum, and nature abhors weakness. And then you have the Darwin Effect, right? Where people just, where they sense weakness and then they go for it, right? They just take it out. That's the danger here, right?
Well, that's how geopolitics works. You get what you can and avoid trouble as much as possible. That's how countries work. They're not people. They are things, basically, at that level. And they're just power and influence maximizing things. So they will go for whatever they can get. Generally speaking, someplace like China or Russia, they'll take what they can get, and the U.S. of course too. I mean, we got to lump the U.S. into the list of predators in the world. We're exactly the same as those guys are when it comes to geopolitics, and so as long as there's some kind of a balance of power, such that nobody feels comfortable just indulging their predatory instincts to the max, you get an uneasy peace, which is really the best the human race can hope for most of the time. But when you take away the inhibitions from predatory entities, then they tend to indulge themselves a little more than they would otherwise. And we're kind of creating the conditions for something like that out there. We haven't mentioned Iran yet. There's a lot of things they want in the Middle East that just got easier to take in the last few weeks.
Yeah, well, this is a bad show, and it sounds like there's going to be a big fight over divvying up Afghanistan, and we aren't going to be running the show anymore. The U.S., that is, not we, but the United States will not be running this show any longer, and nothing good's going to come of that one, right?
Don't just survive, thrive. The Financial Survival Network.
FPX Nickel is developing the large-scale Dakar Nickel District in central British Columbia. Within the district is FPX Nickel's PEA stage Baptiste nickel deposit, which is projected to be among the world's top 10 largest nickel mines by annual output. The Baptiste deposit has the potential for the lowest quartile operating costs at just $2.74 per pound. And compared to recent global nickel mines, the project requires a low capex. FPX is also commencing its first ever drill program at its Van target in the Dakar Nickel District. Surface samples have indicated that the Van target footprint is larger in scale and 10 to 15% higher in grade than Baptiste. FPX Nickel trades in Canada as FPX and on the OTC under FPOCF. To learn more, go to fpxnickel.com. That's fpxnickel.com.
This is the Financial Survival Network, the information you need to thrive now more than ever.
Well, I mean, we can always hope that things work out, but right now we've created the conditions for turmoil and for for some fairly extreme things to happen possibly. So the list of things we should be worried about with our investments just keeps growing and growing.
Yeah.
You got now we've got some serious geopolitical stuff to add to it, along with rising inflation and labor shortages and on and on, and vastly overvalued financial assets. So it's a little hard to believe that anybody owns a big stock portfolio in this world anymore. I mean, they're making money on it right now, but it just doesn't seem like a prudent thing to do with money that you want to keep long term. I don't know.
It seems like it's a little bit risky, doesn't it?
Well, there are just so many risks out there. I mean, you can go down the list of cyber attacks and other kinds of natural disaster-ish things that are out there, and these big fires, and we've discussed this on your show a bunch of times. How there are a lot of things that are just low probability events, but if you add up all the low probability events, you get the probability of some big event happening that is very serious as fairly high. You can't tell which one it's going to be, but that one of them is probably going to happen in the next few years is better than 50-50, I think. So, and we've added to that with Afghanistan and all the rest just lately.
Yeah, we certainly have. And hey, not the only news out there. People seem to be turning against lockdowns, turning on lockdowns, the lockdown states, aren't they?
Yeah, France and Australia, which are, kind of very different entities going in, because France, you have a lot of protests and street violence and stuff. It's fairly normal for them because they've just got a history of that kind of interaction. But Australia is typically a very peaceful place, but they're both having these really violent street protests over their aggressive lockdowns. It's like a lot of people in both of those countries are just sick of it and they don't want to deal with it anymore. But the police are just wading into these protests, so that the government is saying, you know what, you're going to do this whether you like it or not. And people are saying, well, we're not going to do this at all. And you've got the police doing things that seem really out of character, at least in Australia's case. And well, so if you look at the video of these clashes between police and protesters in both France and Australia, the people look like really unlikely revolutionaries. A lot of them are middle class, reasonably well dressed and everything. They're not the kind of people that are normally out in the streets protesting and fighting with cops, but they're doing it this time. So that is the group, I guess, that is most frustrated by these new lockdowns and COVID passports and really rigid controls by the state over people's what used to be considered constitutional freedoms. So this is just one more piece of instability in a world that has a lot of different pieces of instability going on right now. And you have to wonder whether they combine into something much more serious. And we have to hope not. We have to hope that the Delta variant turns out not to be as serious as the public health officials seem to think it is, and that cooler heads prevail in a lot of these cases where governments back off. I guess I've got to take that side of the argument for sure. Governments should really back off and adopt the Florida model, like what's going on around you, Kerry. That's
the Swedish model,
the healthiest way, or the Swedish model. Yeah, just don't take away everybody's freedom over something that is really not as serious as, for instance, the Spanish flu in the 1920s or AIDS or something like that. This is just not that big of a deal. If you look at, for instance, Absolutely. The CDC's numbers, their newest numbers for deaths by age group don't even show on the chart people 30 years and younger. They don't even show up. Their numbers are like 0.2 per people dying per 100,000. So it's not an issue for the biggest group of the population right now. So hopefully it would go that way. But you can't really make any predictions about how the public health officials of the world are going to behave, because they've shown themselves to be both incompetent and erratic so far. So we can't predict the future based on any sense that these guys are competent or honest, I don't think.
Yeah, definitely not. And we got Dr. Fraudchi there, and he's still singing his same tune. I was watching a video of a guy who's one of the frontline doctors. This guy is the most prolific doctor, medical writer, also educator, and all-around expert in his field, not so much in immunology or infectious disease, but he's at the front line treating these people. What we've seen is, and he was saying, is that the government put absolutely no work, no emphasis on therapeutics. It's like, you go get your COVID test, and then you come up positive and you go home and you stay there. And if you wind up in the hospital, too bad. If you don't, then you're okay. And really, they never put any effort to educate the public about preventative measures. We all know what they are. Among them, zinc and vitamin D and vitamin C now, they're saying, because they're saying like 80% of the people who perished from COVID had vitamin C deficiencies as well. They never talked any of that. And now what you got in Florida, you got our governor DeSantis is basically set up these stations around the state where people can get the monoclonal antibodies, which have proven effective in treating COVID. My doctor sent around an email saying, if you get COVID, you need to have a plan. Immediately get a rapid test. If you're positive, head down to the station where they're infusing the monoclonal antibody and get it right away. And he said he had treated 20 patients. All of them made full recoveries, and some of them were very sick. So DeSantis, again, is leading the way.
Yeah, I think your governor might just be the next president, Kerry. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, good old Ron.
Yeah,
well, he's not afraid to take the heat. And hey, if Florida's mortality rate crashes while the number of so-called cases are going up, then he will have proven himself to be a hero, John.
Yeah, and it's good that we've got a couple of states doing stuff like this, because you really need a control group and any kind of an experiment. And we are running a massive vaccination experiment on the U.S. right now. And to have a couple of places where there are no, real lockdowns and no mask mandates and not 100% vaccination rates. That gives us a chance to see how that model works side by side with the standard model of trying to vaccinate everybody and controlling their behavior and everything. And, I suspect one of the reasons why the mainstream media and the mainstream health authorities are so angry and so desperate to get everybody vaccinated is that they, in that way, can eliminate the control group. And nobody will be able to ascribe anything to the vaccines because everybody's vaccinated. So we won't know what it could have been otherwise. And they're failing with the attempt to get 100% vaccination rates in the U.S. So we are going to have a control group. And we are going to be able to see over the next couple of years how the two groups do. And I think that's going to be a very interesting experiment. And, I suspect that the Florida model wins out in the end.
No doubt. I'm inclined to agree with you, not just because I live in Florida, but we're seeing an alternative, and that can really be helpful. And you have to try different things when you're faced with a challenge, because if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you know what they say. That's the definition of insanity. So in any event, make sure you go over, take a look at John's site, dollarcollapse.com, our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Subscribe to both our sites and send us an email. I'll get John to answer it next time, kl@kerrylutz.com. John, we will catch up with you in a couple of weeks, and pretty soon summer will be over.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.